Listen. Stand tall. Breathe deep. Feel every pulse in your veins for this moment, this breath, this unshakable truth that we are here to ignite in you a fire that no chain can bind, no shadow can dim, no doubt can silence. You are not the echo of others' expectations. You are the thunder they didn't dare predict. The title sets the stage. They had the money, the power, the stalkers. You had one move they never saw coming. And the whisper beneath that roar, the thumbnail truth. They had billions. You had one phone call. From the moment you realized they had stacked everything against you, wealth beyond counting, hands reaching into control, watchers in every corner, you knew the horizon was not theirs to command alone. You saw the letters, the messages, the threats, the surveillance, the weight of oppression hung heavy. You saw the resources, towers of influence, currency that could buy silence, walls built high in arenas of decision. They believed that the sum of their money, their networks, their watchers, their power was infinite, that you were contained in the space they had carved. But in that cage, in that moment, you held something they never forecasted, a move invisibly small yet monumentally mighty, a single phone call, one call, a word, a connection, a truth made manifest. You reached out, you touched possibility, you opened a door they did not know existed. They thought their billions would silence you, that their watchers, every moving eye, could preempt your resistance. Yet their power trembled when you realized you were never really alone. You may ask, how did one phone call shift the axis beneath their feet? It shifted it because that call carried your voice, your resolve, your intention crystallized into something unbreakable. You whispered to someone who held conscience, someone who had ears that could not be bought, someone whose heart mirrored yours. And in that exchange, in that moment of vulnerability, you drew a map nobody warned them about. That one conversation tipped scales. That one truth released a flood. Notice, your move was simple. It did not need armies. It did not require more dollars than God. It did not depend on flexibility of influence. You didn't dance in the halls of their mansions. You didn't shout from their stages. You just made the line straight. This is what I know. This is what I will not accept. This is what I choose. And you connected with someone who heard, someone who believed, someone who could act. Understand this. They rely on the illusion of control. They count on the idea that money buys loyalty, that power buys fear, that watchers get total vision. But control is brittle when truth finds cracks, and your one move cracked everything open. You, who may have felt small, unseen, unheard, you were vast, you were thunder in disguise, you were the very tremor in their foundation, because you had something no fortune could fence in. Moral clarity, unwavering courage, unyielding voice. So hear this now. Though they had the money, though they had the power, though the stalkers watched every shadow you cast, you found a way. Because you recognized the core of their fear was not just exposure. It was your refusal to be muzzled, your refusal to accept that they define your story. They thought they held you down. They thought they held all the cards. But you held one card they never saw, the card of authenticity, the card of alignment, the card of truth. Let me paint for you how this victory spreads. That phone call traveled through unseen lines. It stirred someone else's conscience. It turned allies. It opened ears that had been closed. It prompted action, and every ripple from that call unsettled the foundation built by their billions. You see, power without just cause is hollow. Money without purpose decays. And watchers, stalkers, observers, They only have strength when you believe they have authority over your heart. When you believe you can be silenced. When you believe your voice is small. But the instant you believe otherwise, the structures quake. You understand now that your one move was not just strategy. It was the unchaining of your spirit. It was the hand raised in darkness saying, I am here, I refuse to bend, I choose integrity, I call upon truth. It was faith in connection. It was reaching beyond fear. No matter how many rooms they own, no matter how many eyes follow your footsteps, no matter how heavy the shadow of their influence, that one move, the word spoken into trust, begins reshaping the world. And it is reshaped not by force, but by clarity. They shook when you spoke. They faltered when you persisted. They lost when you whispered truth. Because in that phone call lay the weight of everything they tried to hide. Lies, corruption, betrayal, greed. And that call brought witnesses, brought attention, brought accountability. And once those forces are in motion, money and power cannot fully snuff out light. Remember, they may try their tricks again. They may muster new watchers, build new towers, wield new money. But you have planted something enduring. You have awakened a network. You have birthed courage. You have shifted the story. Your triumph is not the end. It is the threshold. Because others need to hear what you have heard. They need to see what you have seen. They need to know that when the powers line up and the watchers surround, a single aligned action, a single phone call, a single refusal, a single voice, raised in integrity can reverse trajectories. Do not diminish your move. Do not discount your call. Do not feel small for speaking what you felt. Do not let them gaslight you into thinking you were naive. Number. That in one move carried potency precisely because it came from you. Because it was yours. Because no money, no power, no watcher could replicate your pulse, your certainty, your presence. Hold this truth. Real power is when you act, even when fear is ready to choke your throat. Real influence is when you insist on justice, even if the watchers linger, even if the money floods the silence. Real courage is making the move nobody among them foresaw. They thought their resources would buy loyalty. They thought their mouths would close. They thought their watchers would find every weakness. But they never computed the magnitude of your resolve. They never measured the strength born of someone who stands inside their truth. And so now, walking forward, know that the moment of your one move is not behind you. It is alive inside you. Every step you take from here is built on that foundation. Every word you speak, every action you make, carries the echo of that phone call. You owe them nothing. You owe fear nothing. You owe compromise nothing. You owe the dark nothing. You owe only the light within you. You owe only the voice that resists. You owe only the courage that pressed dial when the whole world seemed set to ignore you. So rise, not because you have defeated them fully, but because you have discovered the power they did not expect. Because you have become the storm in the silence. Because you have redefined what it means to be watched, to be pressured, to be controlled. Because you have shown that one move guided by courage rewrites every stacked deck. Let that image burn. Billions across them, a single phone call from you. They had the stage, they had the audience, they had the threat of every shadow. But you had your voice, you had your heart, you had your move. Walk forward now with your head lifted. Others may tremble at the size of what you challenge, but you know the size of what you carry. You know your worth, you know your truth, you know your power. They counted everything but that, and in the quiet of your conviction, in the certainty of your intent, you become unbreakable. So stand, speak call, connect, resist, persist. Because this is the moment your light shatters their darkness. This is the moment they realize that no amount of money, no legion of power, no army of watchers can fully contain a heart aligned with what is right. They had billions. You had one phone call. And that call changed everything. They had everything they thought could not be challenged. Vaults of wealth locked behind marble and steel. Names whispered in political rooms, hands in every system, cameras blinking from every ceiling and corner and corridor. They had status, control, silence bought in bulk. They had watchers, enforcers, those who nodded before asking questions. They had the comfort of thinking you wouldn't speak, that you wouldn't risk it, that you would stay small. But what they forgot, what they always forget, is that when one person dares to stand in full truth, the game shifts. It doesn't just change the rules, it dissolves the entire board. You weren't playing their game anymore. You stepped outside it. You made the call, and with that one act, you became the anomaly they couldn't calculate. You became the ripple that started the flood. They didn't see it. They didn't feel it at first. But then systems started to hesitate. Their circles started to crack. People they relied on began to ask questions. That's what truth does. It starts slow, quiet, like a seed, and then it grows, it spreads, it roots in places they never prepared for. Your one phone call became a beacon. Others started to look in your direction. Eyes opened. Not the kind they paid for, the real kind. The kind that sees past luxury and smoke. You weren't alone anymore. Because courage calls to courage. And silence, when broken by truth, makes a sound that travels farther than they ever feared. That's why they panicked. Not because of the call itself, but because of what it represented. You chose clarity over comfort. You chose resistance over retreat. You chose integrity over illusion. And they had no defense for that, because all their strength was built on the assumption that people like you wouldn't dare. But you did, and now the world begins to tilt. They thought they'd buried you under weight, under fear, under surveillance and manipulation and power plays. But what they didn't understand is that pressure doesn't destroy every soul. Sometimes it forges something unbreakable. Sometimes it sharpens. And in your case, it lit a fire. This wasn't just about exposing wrong. It was about reclaiming dignity, about choosing to become the storm in the stillness, about walking into the fire with open eyes and unshaken hands. You didn't just challenge them. You called everything they built into question. You made them look in the mirror they avoided for years. And now, the watchers, those who followed orders without question, are starting to shift. Some are turning away, some are speaking, some are realizing that the machine they supported has cracks deep within. That's the power of one move rooted in truth. It doesn't just shake walls. It makes people question why those walls were ever built. You stood up without an army. You fought without a weapon. You rose without a crown. And that's why your rise is unstoppable. Because it didn't depend on anyone's permission. It came from within. And now, nothing they offer can buy it back. You weren't trying to be a hero. You were simply unwilling to live a life controlled by fear. And that, right there, is what made you powerful beyond all calculation. You didn't need to shout. You didn't need to destroy. You didn't even need revenge. You just needed to speak. And now, the echo of your voice reaches places you may never see. That's what happens when a person rises in silence, moves in truth, and strikes without vengeance, but with vision. They become legend, not because of the noise they make, but because of the shift they cause. And now, let this be clear. Your path doesn't end here. This wasn't just one act of rebellion. It was the beginning of a blueprint, a signal to every other soul who's watching from the shadows. A message that yes, it is possible. Yes, they can be challenged. Yes, one move, one phone call, one decision can start the unraveling. You may never get applause, you may not get gratitude, but you'll have something greater. Peace in your own skin, a spine that didn't bend, a legacy forged not in wealth, but in resolve. Because while they had billions, you had something far rarer, a conscience that wouldn't shut up, and the courage to act on it. They believed the Watchers were enough, that fear would hold, that money would seal every mouth and lock every truth. But you proved otherwise, and now they'll never sleep the same again. So keep walking, not for vengeance, but for the ones who will come after you, for those still trying to decide if they should speak, for the ones who are being watched, being followed, being silenced. Let them know there is a way out, and that way begins with one move. You are that example. You are the proof. You are the shift. And now, when they sit in their towers and count their assets, they'll remember the one they couldn't control, the one they couldn't silence, the one they didn't see coming. You. Because in the end, it wasn't their billions that mattered. It was your voice. And that phone call, that single phone call, became a revolution. They will never admit it out loud. But the moment your voice cut through their silence, the moment your truth was transmitted through that single phone call, they knew. They felt it. A system they'd spent years perfecting through manipulation, intimidation, calculated control, had been breached by something they could neither predict nor prevent: your resolve. And that's the irony they'll never escape. They had all the armor in the world, but you found the one place they forgot to guard: the human soul still willing to risk it all for what's right. Now the question rises from the ashes of their disbelief. What comes next? They will regroup. They will try to erase the ripples you've created. They'll use PR machines, distractions, denials, fake smiles in press rooms, and men in suits with polished lies. They will try to paint you as reckless, unstable, emotional. They'll call it a misunderstanding. They'll rewrite the narrative until their pages bleed with fiction. Why? Because the truth burns. It burns when it gets too close to those who've built entire legacies out of deception. But what they can never undo is the shift your act created, because somewhere out there, someone else was watching, maybe in silence, maybe feeling small, maybe wondering if their voice matters. And then they saw you stand. And now the idea is alive. They can too. You see, it's not just about exposing the powerful. It's about empowering the quiet. You gave them proof. You gave them a mirror of what one voice, one act, one phone call can do. You gave them more than motivation. You gave them permission. They can't stop that. This is what makes your move eternal. Not because it was loud, not because it brought immediate justice, but because it echoes. Because it lasts. Because it lives in those who heard it. Your voice became a fracture in the silence, and silence, once cracked, can never return to what it was. They had the money. Yes, the luxury of invisibility, the force of endless lawyers, the confidence of unchecked influence. But all of it was balanced on the assumption that people like you would never wake up. That fear would always win. That silence was more valuable than truth. But you proved them wrong. And now they're afraid, not of you as a person, but of what you represent. The idea, the proof, the possibility that someone else will be next, that more will follow, that their towers built on secrets will face storms that money can't bribe and power can't block. And when they try to fight back with the tools they know best, threats, isolation, financial pressure, media spin, you must remember they are fighting ghosts, because what you started can't be undone, even if they remove your name from the headlines, even if they bury the story, even if they try to shame or silence or distract. Truth doesn't die just because it's inconvenient. You started something they can't track, a movement, an idea, a shift in momentum, and it's growing. You didn't do it for fame. You didn't do it for revenge. You didn't do it because you wanted to be the face of resistance. You did it because you couldn't unsee what you saw. You couldn't unknow what you knew. You couldn't live with yourself if you let them continue unchallenged. And that kind of purpose born from moral clarity, is impossible to counterfeit. They know that now. Their billions can't compete with it. Their watchers can't predict it. Their systems can't suppress it once it's been spoken aloud. And here's what they truly never saw coming. You weren't alone. You never were. Because on the other end of that phone call was someone who listened, someone who believed, someone who acted. That single connection, powered not by greed, but by conviction, was the spark that their empires forgot to fear. They taught the world that power is about wealth, about control, about who you know. But you taught us that power lives in truth, that it rises from within, that it only takes one act of courage to shift 1,000 lives. So when you look back, don't ever regret the risk. Don't ever question whether it mattered. You'll never see the full ripple. You'll never meet every life that was affected. But somewhere someone took a stand because of your example. Someone else chose to speak. Someone else refused to be bought. And it started with you. They had everything. But you had enough. Enough to say no. Enough to say not anymore. Enough to make a call that rewrote the narrative. And even now, with their billions still in the bank, with their followers still loyal, with their machines still running, they know what you proved. They can buy silence, but they cannot own truth. They can delay justice, but they cannot prevent it forever. They can try to erase what happened, but they cannot unwrite what's already been felt. And most of all, they cannot unhear your voice. It's out there, like a bell rung in the dark, like a spark carried on the wind. And now it lives in every soul that wonders, can I do the same? Yes, yes, they can. Because you did. And from this moment forward, when they write the stories of the ones who stood when it mattered, your name may be whispered, or it may be lost in the crowd. But the echo of what you did will remain. They will remember the breach. They will remember the shift. They will remember you. Not for being loud, not for being famous, but for being undeniable. And that is a kind of power they never prepared for. They will move on as if nothing happened, at least on the surface. They'll throw curtains over the cracks, shine brighter lights to distract from the damage, speak louder so no one hears the shift beneath their feet. But deep down, they will never forget the moment their untouchable empire felt the weight of one voice they underestimated. You weren't meant to win in their world. You weren't built from the materials they respect, money, legacy, lineage. And that's why your victory shook them, because it came from something they can't buy or predict. A single person, standing tall, choosing principle over comfort, risk over silence, action over fear. You showed the world that real power doesn't wear a suit, doesn't need a title, and doesn't demand recognition. It just needs a moment and the courage to claim it. Your one phone call, made not from a throne but from a place of purpose, became the collapse of a myth. And in that collapse, a new truth was born. They had billions, but you had something they couldn't price: conviction. And now, as you walk away from the storm you survived, understand this: your legacy isn't just in what you exposed, it's in who you've become. You didn't just challenge a system, you transcended it. You are now living proof that no matter how powerful the enemy, how dark the room, how loud the watchers, one bold move, born from truth, can rewrite everything. Others will follow, not because they know your name, but because they felt your echo. You gave them a template. When the world is watching, when the powerful are circling, and when fear is tightening its grip, stand anyway, speak anyway, call anyway. Because in the face of giants, sometimes all it takes is one unexpected move to remind the world. Courage, even alone, is louder than power built on silence. And when they look back, when history whispers about what cracked the concrete, your name may not be shouted, but your choice will remain forever